In the previous sessions of the Age of Deceit, we identified Satan's attack strategies. In this session, we will expose what happens when deception comes through indoctrination. The Cambridge Dictionary defines the term indoctrination as the process of repeating an idea or belief to someone until they accept it without criticism or question. In the 20th century, we saw two prime examples of the power of propaganda as it preyed on the innocent minds of the youth. The Holocaust Encyclopedia tells us that from the 1920s, the Nazi Party targeted German youth as a special audience for its propaganda messages. These messages emphasized that the party was a movement of youth, dynamic, resilient, forward-looking, and hopeful. Millions of German young people were won over to Nazism in the classroom and through extracurricular activities. In January 1933, the Hitler Youth had approximately 100,000 members. But by the end of the year, this figure had increased to more than 2 million. By 1937, membership in the Hitler Youth increased to 5.4 million before becoming mandatory in 1939. The German authorities then prohibited or dissolved all competing youth organizations. The original purpose of the Hitler Youth was to train boys to enter the SA, stormtroopers, a Nazi Party paramilitary formation. After 1933, however, youth leaders sought to integrate boys into the Nazi national community and to prepare them for service as soldiers in the armed forces or later in the elite SS. The Soviet leader Lenin stated, "We need that generation of young people who begin to reach political maturity in the midst of a disciplined and desperate struggle against the bourgeoisie." In this struggle, that generation is training genuine communists. It must subordinate to this struggle and link up with each step in its studies, education, and training. It's important to note that the term bourgeoisie is a French word that was popularized by Russian revolutionary Karl Marx in an attempt to vilify the enemy of the communist ideals. It means the middle class, typically with reference to its perceived materialistic value or conventional attitudes. Therefore, the bourgeoisie is a person with social behavior and political views held to be influenced by private property interests. In other words, a capitalist. Deception by indoctrination is not limited to despotic institutions. Sadly, there are many examples of brainwashing within religious groups. Many people use the expression, drink the Kool-Aid, and vaguely know it means to surrender one's free will and believe whatever they are told to do. This expression comes from the 1978 tragedy of Jonestown in the South American nation of Ghana, where over 900 people were massacred as they followed their leader Jim Jones in a communal suicide pact. Among the dead were more than 300 children who drank the Kool-Aid laced with deadly cyanide poison, thereby demonstrating the power of mind control. These devotees of the People's Temple were programmed to do whatever Jones told them to do, as they widely believed him to be God's authority on earth. There are many more examples that could be offered in this account, but suffice it to say that many have been led away like sheep to the slaughter by these wolves in sheep's clothing. I submit for your consideration 3 key components to achieve widespread indoctrination, otherwise known as brainwashing. Number 1. Indoctrination begins with isolation. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, or USSR, surrounded their empire with what the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called the Iron Curtain. Churchill used it to refer specifically to the political, military, and ideological barrier created by the USSR. According to USSR historians, it was created as a veil of protection following World War II to prevent open contact between itself and the West. Like the 2,500-year-old Great Wall of China, with its border fortifications stretching over 4,000 kilometers, 2,500 miles, the pretense of protection has the downside of preventing integration with the advancements being made around you. Number 2, deprivation. Indoctrination is established through deprivation. Manufactured scarcity is a powerful weapon when attempting to control the masses. This is done by making everyone dependent on the benevolence of the elite. In both the Nazi and Soviet youth camps, food, shelter, and social acceptance were doled out in meager portions in order to maintain the attention of the children. This would then cultivate loyalty through reward for submission. Dressed in the party-approved uniform, these young disciples were molded into the image pre-established by the ruling elite. Number 3, repetition. Indoctrination is maintained by repetition. The substance of this brainwashing is constructed by the elite who rule over the majority of the ignorant. It often masquerades as education. There is a fundamental and important difference between education and indoctrination. Education involves a broad investigation into what is true and what is not true. Indoctrination is solely focused on influencing the hearer to believe in a narrow narrative without being able to back up these newfound truths with anything other than their own opinion. It offers cold monologue over constructive dialogue. It limits all cross-checking or independent validation. Ultimately, this leads to the villainization of the outsiders, closing down the mind of the child so it can be filled up with a carefully constructed propaganda. Joseph Goebbels, Reich Minister of Propaganda of Nazi Germany, has been credited as saying, "The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is borne in mind constantly. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over." Again, he said, "If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it, and you will even come to believe it yourself." Concerning the mass media, he stated, "Think of the press as a great keyboard on which the government can play." Force and fear make up the foundation for all successful indoctrination. Force is expressed as the overwhelming power to subdue all adversaries. This power is not necessarily one of mere military might alone, but also reveals itself as the irresistible tsunami of public opinion. Feeding fear leads to spiritual blindness, which yields the fruit of hate. When hate takes hold of a human heart, it's amazing what terrible things it can produce. Today, we see the pervasive power of the special interest cartels who are seeking to control of what is to be considered as the acceptable societal narrative. The media call it the cancel culture. Philosophically, the cancel culture is deemed necessary in order to prevent the spread of racist, violent, and insurrectionary incitement. To its devotees, to be woke is to be awake to the systematic injustice of society and, by extension, the rest of Western civilization. Their thoughts are that this current civilization is part of a long line of oppression and genocide that must be torn down in its entirety. To impose this idea on others, the woke use the tactics of mob harassment, public penance, historical denunciation, and most of all, the weaponization of cancel culture to deprive people of their platforms, livelihoods, and reputation. Unlike the Iron Curtain erected by the leaders of the Communist Party to solidify their power base, these woke warriors are attempting to erect an ideological curtain that will encircle the whole globe, in which they will be the embodiment of the thought police as described in the dystopian novel 1984. Given the current state of affairs, it would appear that the Orwellian fictional idea of thought crime is being implemented here and now by the woke elite. There is a way of breaking the stronghold of indoctrination of our youth. In 1865, following the American Civil War, which saw more than 600,000 deaths, the American poet William Ross Wallace wrote a poem that praised motherhood. Here within, he created one powerful phrase that has been quoted out of context for decades, which states, "For the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world." When you read it in its context, you will find a powerful revelation of its original intent. The hand that rocks the cradle. Blessings on the hand of woman. Angels guard its strength and grace. In palace, cottage, hovel, oh, no matter where the place. Would that never storm assail it, rainbows ever gently curled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Infancy's the tender fountain, power may with beauty flow, mothers first to guide the streamlets, from them souls unresting grow. Grow on for the good or evil, sunshine stream or evil hurled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Woman, how divine your mission here upon our natal sod. Keep, oh keep the young heart open always to the breath of God. All true trophies of these ages are from mother loved and pearled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Blessings on the hand of women, fathers, sons, and daughters cried, and the sacred song is mingled with the worship in the sky. Mingles where no tempest darkens, rainbows evermore are hurled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. The Bible tells us that we can counteract the darkness of societal indoctrination with the light of the truth. Deuteronomy chapter 6 tells us, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thy heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. And thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. Remember the encouragement of Solomon, where he says in Proverbs 22, A prudent man foresees the evil, and hideth himself. But the simple pass on and are punished. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches, honor, and life. Thorns and snares are in the way of the froward. He that doth keep his soul shall be far from them. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. May God continue to bless you as you continue to study His Word.